then just talk about whatever you want to talk about. I think I'd like to talk about whatever you don't understand about the whole thing. There's a lot I don't understand about it either. I don't know where to start. Most of prior to about the 1950s, there was really very little formal work done on those, with the exception of Murray's work. And during the 50s, the whole deal in Alaska revolved around predator control. And there was very little other than that done. People learned a lot in the course of that work. Not as much as they could have, probably, but they learned a lot. There's a good general knowledge of wolf distribution and stuff like that during the 1950s. During the 60s, predator control ceased, and R.A. Roush, who is now director of the game division, did quite a bit of work with carcasses, wolf carcasses, to the tune of, I think, 4,500 over the period of about 7 years. Pretty well laid a really good foundation for reproductive biology in wolves, litter size, a little bit of food habits stuff, and production and survival of pups in general. Southeast Alaska has there's quite a bit of knowledge about wolves and deer in Southeast Alaska, but not a great deal of formal research has been done, long-term type stuff. There's different projects. The early work indicated that a density of about 1 per 25 square miles was the maximum that people expected in Southeast Alaska. But at that time, there were, of course, a lot of deer, and that situation has changed, like many others. In 1970, when I started working, I could probably say most about what I did because I was there. But I started working for Fish and Game in 1970 and was supposed to study the ecology of wolves in the North Slope. Summer food habits and denning ecology and stuff like that. It looked like there was a really low population up there, and I went up there and by chance stumbled into a place called Anaktuvuk Pass, where there lives about 120 Eskimo people, inland Eskimos, who probably have as good a working knowledge of wolf ecology and behavior by virtue of having handled so many and hunted for wolf dens in the summer for about 30 years, finding dens mainly by seeing wolves traveling this way or that way, and knowing that wolves are usually going out hunting in the evening and come back in the morning and sleep during the day, and direction of travel and moving camps and stuff. They did that for about 30 years, and there was a dozen guys there who probably, I'm sure they had spent more time just watching wolves do things without being, and known to the wolf than anybody in the world. So I ended up spending a couple of years up there over the period of about 4, just parasitizing those guys and trying to record whatever there was to be recorded. Did a lot of autopsies and carcasses from trapped wolves during the winter. During the summer, looked for dens, accompanied by a couple of them, and just let them fill me in on a lot of stuff about the country, the caribou, wolves. That was really interesting. Recently, last April, Fish and Game began a telemetry study of wolves in Unit 13, and I did that for the first year. That's what this map is about, and that study is ongoing. Right now, there's probably only about 14 wolves collared in 5-6 different packs. We had as many as 9 packs radioed at one time. Total of 17 radio wolves, which we were locating on the average of about 3 times a week. And we were learning quite a bit from that, for that area about population size, getting finally some population estimates that are probably pretty reliable. We've done a lot of surveys, tried to develop census techniques, and you can do it within limits. You can get an idea of wolf abundance doing aerial surveys, but you just feel much more comfortable with some of the newer data we're getting. I guess I could, I think probably people are going to have questions about that business down there, the experimental control work up in this area. And maybe I can talk a little bit about the kind of stuff we were seeing down there. This is an outline of year-round territory after about 9 months of radio tracking. To orient you, Glen Allen is down here, Richardson Highway, Alaska Range, Talkeetna Mountains. This distance would be about 50 or 60 miles here. And these are the 9 packs that we radio track. Red spots are gens. You probably can't see those. And they range from territories as small as a couple hundred square miles, like this one, up to, this one I believe is about 1,600 square miles. 3 young male wolves, no denning affiliation, cruising around the country. That's the big territory. These, there's a pack here of 6 adults and 4 pups. And that, to our knowledge, a pack has disintegrated. It's disappeared through mortality and emigration. All members of the pack that no longer exist as a pack. There might be a couple wolves there, but they aren't denning and whatever. Very poor country. A few moose, some beaver, and that's about it. Caribou in the wintertime. But there's a lot of indications of stress, including this really large home range. A collared female left this pack and began denned with a pack over here, which is kind of I think that may be a pretty new thing in wolf ecology, but sure happens elsewhere. An old male wolf, about a 9 or 10-year-old male wolf, left this pack and for a period of about a month traveled back and forth over a very big area here and finally was killed and eaten by a pack of wolves south of the Glen Highway and eaten. I don't know if I should go into the business about each one. We can if you want later. Food habits, summer food habits from these packs, which are in good moose country, and these packs up here, which are in fair moose country. Calf moose and adult moose were the predominant item in the diet in total. At this den and this den, however, snowshoe or beaver and snowshoe hare, and up here beaver and ground squirrels were pretty important, like about 50% of the occurrences in scats. At a den over here that we found was not a radioed pack. Found something pretty unusual there. In a couple hundred scats, about 80% of them had snowshoe hare remains, and half of them were entirely snowshoe hare, which is kind of puzzling. I'm not sure why. There are more rabbits over there than other places in the area, but it's by no means a rabbit high. I don't know where they're getting it. The total of number of wolves in this area, as best I can figure, an area of about 7,000 square miles here, was about 120, I believe. I included 77 of those in radioed packs, and then a few more that I included because we had quite a number of sightings of them in peripheral areas, down here, here, up here. The density averaged out to about 1 wolf per 60 square miles.
What year was that, Paul?
Last year, 75. Yeah, that would be a October population estimate, and an average between a low density area, 1 per 80, and relatively high density area down here, which is 1 per 45. Another interesting thing, a thing that was really surprising to me, something I learned from this deal was what I think is the importance of grizzly bears as predators on moose. In Unit 13, there are a lot of bears. They're probably more abundant now than they have been for 20 years. Numbers are markedly decreased in the 1950s in connection with poisoning programs. Lots of bears were killed in those operations. Anyway, there are a lot of bears, and we saw a lot of interaction at carcasses. And sometimes, a few cases, we knew the bears had killed the moose. In other cases, you couldn't tell who had killed it. But both were there, the bear on the carcass, the wolves hanging around. We saw a lot of that. And there's also instances, other people have seen it. Common. They see more of that than they have wolf predation. In fact, it's more common somebody run into a bear killing a big wolf moose. But they figure into the predator-prey business in Unit 13 pretty strongly, I think, especially in the last 3 or 4 years. Years ago, people never saw that. 20 years ago, there's just bears don't do anything, and they're too slow, and they don't catch moose. I don't agree. I think they do. To say a few things about what I see as a changing understanding and people about predator-prey relationships. Things have really done flip-flops in this as well as other fields of biology. I think right now we're going through one, and at least the scientific consensus is changing, and that doesn't say what the politics has to do, but it's something in the whole mess. In the 50s in Alaska, I think you would have been hard put to find a friend of the wolf and somebody who would say we shouldn't do all that poisoning. I don't think there was very little uproar about it. I wasn't here then. Bob, you probably know something about the tone of the times then.
Well, there were a few young punks like Bob Roush
Yeah.
and a few others that were hassling Joe Miner and Bob Burkholder, but it was pretty much just a very few young people just getting into the establishment that were challenging the assumption that wolves were gabbed.
And no one got sued in those days. And in the 1960s, there was a lot of this was on the part of the Department of Fish and Game, educating people and getting rid of the poison, the bounties, setting seasons and bag limits, and just telling all these guys who are running around saying the wolves are eating all the moose that full of beans. That's not true. And they were doing, in retrospect, I think they were doing probably what I would have done in the same situation. There were lots of animals, moose and caribou, that things were quite different. The caribou and moose populations in Unit 13 peaked synchronously, which they probably won't do again for a long time. But there were really a lot of animals, and there was no problems. There was very little conflict, and you just had few declining populations. Everything was just pretty good. Then things changed around here and in south central Alaska, changing about 1970, 71. Things changed biologically, and that changed things legally and politically for the wolf as well. In two very bad winters, 70, 71 here, and 71, 72 down there, both pretty much record kind of winters, and resulting very high mortality to all segments of the moose population, and especially to calves. And that changed things around a lot, along with increasing hunting pressure, the mobility and the ability of hunters from urban areas to do things in the bush is pretty amazing, and I think we were not cautious enough about it soon enough. We were just thought the country was a lot bigger and things were much safer than they were, and they aren't. And of course, in the 60s, late 60s and early 70s, as far as the scientific community could see, they couldn't find, I don't know how hard they looked, but they couldn't find examples where wolves had been a very important, a primary decimating force on a prey population, like deer or wolf or moose or sheep, whatever. And the notion was that they're a necessary thing, and in the long run, I'm sure they are. In the short run, they are too, I guess. But they only kill sick animals, old animals, and they exist in perfect balance with their prey. Well, I wish it were true, but it isn't. And that's where we're doing a lot of turnabouts. We're supporting and agree with the people who were telling that it wasn't necessary 5-10 years ago, and now they're kind of alive, and it's quite a mess. So I see the scientific understanding going, it's changing again, and it's quite a different story than we were telling them years ago, and the growing pains are pretty severe. I think that the three places that I see as this coming out very strongly, the biological part of it. One is here in Alaska, and a little better documented are situations in Minnesota, and there's one about to descend on Isle Royale, I think. In Alaska, we've seen moose populations decline by up to 70 or 80% in some areas since 1970, and it's continuing. The calves aren't surviving very well. Things are declining further, and it doesn't seem to be turning itself around naturally. We all kind of looked for that to happen because with what we knew about wolf ecology just even 5 years ago, you just didn't want to believe that things could have to alter so drastically for so long to correct themselves and get back to where there were good numbers of moose and wolves that people could hunt. And in Minnesota, it was kind of the same situation, a bad winter triggering things, deteriorating range there. Deer range is deteriorating rather poorly, growing up out of reach, less logging and fewer fires. And according to Dave Meach, who's been watching that one, he's had about 25 radioed wolves on the average for 6 or 7 years. He's been watching this a long time, but the wolf population peaked, a bad winter, lots of free meat, surplus meat laying around. Pup survival was great the next year, and the wolf population was already high. It was up there, but it just got a little extra shot in the arm. The deer population, which was chugging along, took a really, really steep drop, and the wolves just rode it down. And right now, the wolf population on a scale of 10 to 1 down here, the wolves would be roughly here, and the deer are about 0. They're almost all gone. And last summer, by last fall, the wolf population had increased 33%. And there just aren't any deer. You can fly for miles and miles and miles, and you don't see a track. And it's an area of about 1,500 square miles that's spreading. 4 years ago, Dave Meach would have told you that he wouldn't have believed it could happen. He would never thought he'd see the day when he'd have to say that something like that happened. But it's happened. It's irrefutable. And I think it'll be published soon. I have a paper in the middle. And it's going to be one of the more interesting ones, I think. So, and on Isle Royale, for many years, from about 59 to 70, people were getting pretty good information on what was going on with Isle Royale wolves and moose. And up until 69, things went along real well. There was 21 to 29 wolves, mostly in one pack. From what everybody could see, a stable moose population. Wolves were killing moose less than a year old and more than 6 years old, and there appeared to be a large part of the population that was pretty much invulnerable to predation. 1970, a bad winter, really bad winter. Had a really high calf mortality. A lot of malnourished calves were born in the spring and never did achieve the size that they normally would. The wolf population since then has increased. It's doubled to 44, which is the highest ever recorded in the last 25 years. And that isn't a lot of wolves. It doesn't sound like a lot. But in retrospect, it looks like the moose population's been declining for 3 years at an overall by about 20%. Botanists, range ecologists have been saying this is going to happen. There's an old guy named Crafting who's been predicting something like this for a long time. But the island looks pretty much like a park. The understory is gone. It's obviously pushed. The range is really pushed. And that wasn't it probably would have lasted a lot longer in the absence of that bad winter. But now that appears to be declining. If it rights itself, maybe it will. But I kind of doubt it, and I think some other people would too. So that's the place, I think, from which the balance of nature, the idea of the balance of wolves and prey got the most support. There was a lot of good information, and it just seemed to hum along at a very nice rate. Everything worked out well for a period of 10 years. Prior to that, 15 or 20 years before that, moose were quite rare, and they had a big fire and had a population explosion and stuff. But anyway, that looked to be a pretty stable thing. It might be interesting to talk about what happened in Minnesota. This is what the people that are watching that situation, this is how they see the effect of wolf predation on that population, just from demographically. This is a little chart that Dave Meach draws quite often, but having about, well, after that bad winter, the deer population declined. It was to a point where the number of wolves there, and they're hunting in the summer, practically removed all the fawns that were born. They shut off the recruitment at the bottom end of the population, and this age class went down to a really tiny bit. Well, you still had 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6, and whatever existing in the population. When deer reach about 5, 6 years of age, they seem to become quite vulnerable. It was the same thing in Minnesota as on Isle Royale. Moose, the moose in the middle age bracket didn't seem to show up, and calves and the real old adults took the brunt of things. But as the recruitment remained shut off, and as each year went by, these deer that were alive went through their each cohort, and then when they get to about here, they were cut off, and they just cutting off age classes at the top like that. And he said the only thing that can happen is eventually it's going to disappear, and it did. And as those deer became old, they were eaten, and they weren't being replaced. Let's see. So I think that all of the situations where now we have low prey populations, moderate wolf populations, and a problem. And Isle Royale, it isn't going to be a problem. It's going to be interesting to watch, but no one can exert leverage to change things there. They can't alter that at present, at least. In Minnesota, wolf is an endangered species, and the management of it is quite different, and I think control by a government agency is out of the question at present. Here, control isn't, and it's some effort to exert some. I mentioned another interesting thing, and something that bears on things like trying to evaluate whether certain level mortality is having any effect on the whole population, or whether control is going to have an effect, and any beneficial effect to prey population is affected. On Isle Royale, we live in Minnesota, and in the stuff in Unit 13 that we did, saw a phenomenon that the rate of kill, is the number of animals a wolf pack kills, is in proportional to size, really. You can have a pack of 6, which will include 2 adults and 4 pups, 5 months old, who don't do anything as far as killing a moose. Kill as many moose in a month as a pack of 11, including 6 adults and 5 pups. Very close, very little difference there. And I think it's another indication of the kind of animal you're dealing with is you find in the fact that in severe winters, when they're moose or deer are very easy to kill, they kill a lot of extra animals. Single wolves kill deer and leave them largely uneaten. You do see surplus killing then when it's very available. They like to hunt. So I guess I want to get to the discussion part to talk about whatever you people want to talk about. The current business, whatever. The thing to say is what wolf control is supposed to do now that it looks like the relationship is can be one like this, where you go darn near to zero, and knowing what we know about the capacity of animals like moose to reproduce, they're not capable of, only in certain situations are they capable of very rapid increases, and the lower their absolute numbers, the longer this is going to take, and it's an exponential relationship. So things are going to go up real slow, anyway, from a very low level. What you're trying to do with wolf control is cut across here and get it back up here before it goes down here. You can still have a population that can increase at some measurable rate, and so that you can cease doing wolf control sooner than you possibly could if you left it through the
How will that Jerome Wolfe did a study on this. It was a captive wolf pack. And I just want to know what would happen, like what changes could occur. What did it
Anything. It depends which wolves get shot. If pups get shot, it would have very little effect on the nucleus, the breeding part of the pack, and probably not much on its hunting activities. They feel that. I know that. Adult wolves feel that. But there's mortality. Wolves are an animal that has a fairly high rate of natural mortality anyway. From cannibalism, from accidents while hunting, a little from disease, maybe a lot among pups. And a lot of this mortality is occurring to the higher ranking individuals because they're often doing a lot of the hunting part of things. A lot of antagonism, say in interpack rivalry or something during breeding season, they just don't get it. In Unit 13, this pack here, Keg Creek wolves, 3 and then 5 of those wolves were killed by aerial hunters. 5 left. They're doing just fine. The North Slope moose population on the Colville River appears to be hanging in there. Pretty good calf survival, and numbers aren't, haven't shown any, they've shown a decline since maybe 10 years ago, but they seem to be doing okay. That was a really delicate situation because they're so susceptible to overhunting, which they're probably getting. Gravel bars in the Colville River. You can drive up and fly up the Colville River for 2 hours and count 50 places where someone's landed, and you can see a lot of dead moose. And it's only, moose are only distributed within about a mile or a mile and a half of the river for about 120 miles of its length or something. That's most of the moose on the North Slope. I don't know about the other thing. I don't think wolves have been known to make the population extinct yet. And it would have to be a very small, isolated population before they could do it. No, they didn't make an deer extinct on Coronation Island. I think there was 1 deer and 2 wolves left at the end of that experiment. Some guys, Nimrod scientists, about 1963 or something, took some wolves out to a little island about 30 square miles in southeast Alaska. The place was overpopulated with deer. They were small. The range was terrible. It was like a picnic ground. And turned a couple wolves loose. Eventually they may have reached as many as 11, I believe, somewhere there. And I don't even remember how many years later, 10 years later, they could find the tracks of 1 wolf and they thought 2 deer. And then the wolf died.
They don't know whether the deer were the same sex or not.
Yeah.
I think in that situation, it's a nice, neat little story. The vegetation began coming up. Vaccinium that they hadn't seen for a long, long time popped up, and when the pressure was released, the wolves started digging clams for a living, and getting dead seals and that kind of thing. And the only deer were on the very high parts of the island where the wolves could get out. It was really quite a classic little thing, but the numbers were so small that of wolves.
Yeah.
Change from 5 to 6 wolves was a major increase.
Yeah.
And so it really wasn't what a textbook would like to have, but still it was a kind of a fun little experiment.
It's not a fair test.
Now the hunters would argue that you should have left Coronation Island alone. It's the only place there aren't any wolves in southeast Alaska.
Yeah.
Do you think this huge drop in the moose population would happen with the wolves? I mean, okay, 2 bad winters, and the wolves didn't follow the drop as closely, but would that have happened without the pressure from human predation? Such a severe drop in the moose?
I don't, for a place, it depends where you talk about. Maybe some places people made a difference. In some local areas, I think they have. But overall, I would say all it would have done is happen later or quicker, or not as quickly if people would have stayed out of it. Things may have drug out a little bit longer and not have been as drastic. And you could find, if you really could ever know, and you can, you could find a place where people would have just stayed out of it. It would be on its way up now instead of continuing down. But I think over a large part of it, accented it. Right, and right now, I'm not going to talk about that.
You said the number of wolf kills in any given area isn't influenced by the size of the pack in that area?
During winter, I was referring to.
During winter.
Yeah.
I was just wondering how you go about picking an area where you're going to thin out the wolves.
Well, since they have big territories and they're capable of traveling long distances, establishing new ranges, you can't, and plus the fact that moose populations are these, or like in a place like 28, if you killed all the wolves within 30 miles of Fairbanks, the moose population there wouldn't show any big difference from that in the mountains, because a lot of them are the same moose. They're traveling between summer and winter range from there, from the Chena River. There's some resident mooses stay in a very small area, but there don't appear to be many. They're traditional semi-migratory animal, and they're not just don't walk around in a couple square miles all their life. So I don't know. You just try to identify calving areas, if you can, if there is such a thing, and just the general area that you think, one thing, if you think you can do any control with the constraints that are placed, the methods now. Years ago, I think it would have been very relatively simple to do. People did it. They were very effective in some areas. They had poison, aerial hunting, anything they could figure out to kill a wolf was okay. Poison being the most effective. I'm sure with a few Super Cub aircraft and some 5-gallon buckets, some of those guys could, in a couple of weeks, have done what fishing game with a helicopter and a couple planes, that bunch of people, 6 weeks to do, and at about probably 100th or 200th of the cost or something. So that's not available anymore. I don't know. In the case of the Arctic caribou, looking at it, it appeared that the major loss was occurring during the winter because the wolf densities are higher in winter range. That the caribou were there for a longer time. Small mammals are less available, and they're more prone to hunt big game. Anyway, and we recommended, and I think the board agreed, to do the control on the south slope only for a start. We can do it on Unit 26 if it really looks like it's a problem, but don't want to. So, and then probably only half of those units at a time. Right now, they still don't know if it's legal to do the hunt the way they want. That is, give permits selectively to a limited number of people. Say, these are who we want to give them to, or no, you can't have one if you can. They just did that with the caribou, so I don't know. But they're still waiting to find out if that's legal. If not, it's either unlimited permits to anybody who wants one, or do it yourself, which is really expensive. And then I think the other one is just totally unacceptable to too many people. Too hard to control.
Do you think it's within the light of the question that Bob Wheaton raised, that the maximum sustained yield is being looked at when these caribou management?
Yeah, I'd say not critically enough, but it's being looked at. Yeah, people are having to accept the fact that a lot of these populations just can't take what a white-tailed deer population with no predators can take in Pennsylvania. And everybody was trained down there. A lot of people were. And there was no precedent for anything like this. The problem is getting people to kill enough animals so that you don't get overgrowth. You know that story well. Some of those things die hard. But I know I do know in a lot of places where we're going to have situations all the time where it's either remove wolves, keep them really low for a while, or people can't hunt. Period. They just shouldn't be in there. And it's always going to be pushing. I don't know how it's ever going to work out very neatly.
How do you think, it seems like Fish and Game is in a really difficult position trying to decide when they should be just kind of flowing with the cycle and when they should be getting pretty worried about the long-range prospect of a particular herd.
Well, there's a lot of people that are worried, but there aren't many who know how to do anything. And it's very difficult, I think, to do things that are adequate. whether it be wolf control, which is the one least liked by anybody, who's doing it? Typical. But it's not it's a nasty business, and nobody likes to get anywhere near it. But what do you do? If in your best judgment you could make a big difference and avoid a 10-year, pretty much paucity of moose, or do you just let it go and just say, sorry folks, you can't hunt? And plus photographers, you can't take any pictures because there aren't any.
Or do you let them hunt and drive the population even lower, like in the case of the Delchina herd, and then say, wow,
I've heard people say it's going to go anyway, so
we did the best thing we could have done, we knocked it right out.
Yeah. Yeah, she's
That seems really upsetting to me.
It's
The
upsetting
wolves
to me.
killing. I opened up something and I saw these wolves hanging by the furs, talking about how they sold them. And I don't understand. You're saying that's the justification for it because you thought that was the intelligent thing to do because moose were declining.
In some people's minds, to many people,
Some
that is
people's
sufficient
minds.
reason.
But it's too late after it's done. The 100 wolves are gone.
Now, 100 wolves are gone. Yeah, and it's hard on the wolves. And I like them as much as anybody. Yeah, and I'm more familiar with them than a lot of people. Yeah, it bothers me. It used to really hurt me. I guess being around it a lot, you have to get used to some things, and I don't like it. I'm not even a very good
Who are these few people who judge something like that?
Well,
They don't know. They're only guessing.
they're only guessing, but the guesses are getting pretty damn good, I think. And it's getting to a point where that guess, I think, it's really hard to refute it. Some of it. On the other hand, it's no excuse for, say, having a lot of people hunt for a long time. But what do you do?
You can look at it the other way too, that every dead wolf is a newborn loose calf. So
Well, it's more than that. It's 20 or 30.
See, they
Yeah, wolves are just they're just too darn good for their own good. I mean, they are really a pretty impressive animal. They're tough and opportunistic, and they last. They can just stay. They can hunt when things are changing 100%. They just hunt harder. That's the root of the problem. If we can wait 2 years, and it will be definitely due, I'm sure.
I believe they waited 2 years and there would be a total decline in moose.
No, if we thought we could wait 2 years and it would go up, I don't think we'd have a lot of resistance to people fishing game. Nobody's ever anyway, but because it is such a miserable business and it just creates so many problems, you just get to the point where not do it.
The question that she brought up, and of course the attitude that's behind it, is really extremely central to the whole politics of this situation, as you well know. Because people since time immemorial have chosen up sides on critters. You like birch trees, so you cut down your aspen, give the birch a better chance.
Yeah.
You like bluebirds and you don't care for starlings, or whatever it is, you choose up sides, and you can't help that. And you get very emotionally attached with it. Another perspective, I think, needs to be brought in here for a lot of people who don't quite savvy the whole interplay of protein supplies. If people in Alaska could shoot 50,000 large game each year and keep on having the same crop available, essentially, just gross averages, that might be 6,000 moose and 40,000 caribou, or 10,000 deer, whatever it might be. Then that might very well replace the equivalent of, let's say, 15,000 cows, which, and if you look at the ecological disaster that is ranching and feedlot cattle raising, the pesticides, the land clearing, the fertilizer, the quail habitat that disappears because of that 15,000 cows that have to be raised, you would say it's a hell of a good trade ecologically.
Yeah.
So this is where, it's I don't say that, I or any one person has the perfect perspective, but there's just a hell of a lot of things to juggle in this whole situation.
Sir, isn't it true too that it really isn't until like the last decade we really started to try to look objectively at the world and really start to study this. A lot of our knowledge about it
isn't there yet. You know, it's coming out, but a lot of this stuff we just don't know about yet. You know, I mean the biological aspect, the ecology of the wolf. Isn't that true too?
There's the man that said so.
A lot of it isn't there. Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that is true? You know, it isn't until like now we really sunk our teeth in. Because, well, like you mentioned, the 50s, back then we didn't know too much about the ecology of the wolves.
Yeah. Now, most of the knowledge of wolves is really inspires people, and they're very interesting animals to a lot of people. A lot of people have lost the fear of them because of the knowledge, and so much of it. But the other thing that's been learned is an eyebrow raiser. It's causing people to feel very concerned. People who, for a long time, just wouldn't tolerate any of that business about wolf control. Leave them there. They should be there. They know what they're doing. It's right. It's that way.
I was curious, how do you distinguish a wolf kill, say when you don't see it? I mean, is there anything that you can determine that it's a wolf kill rather than a grizzly or maybe a diseased animal that's been fed on by coyotes?
Oh yeah, every situation is a little different. Most of them, when you're doing something like that, most of them they're soon enough that, and you can almost never say that the moose just didn't drop dead, and the wolves found it. It happened not to be frozen, and they ate it up. You can almost never say that, but a lot of times there's tracks of the chase. Mooses, there's not a bear around. That's a pretty good indication, because if you killed it, they'd probably stay there, camp on it for quite a while, maybe a couple of weeks. Would you kill?
In the case of like when there's a lot of moose and the wolves are killing quite a few of them, and they're leaving, you know, part of the remains, then well, I guess that would have to happen in the fall, but say a grizzly could come and take over that moose. And so, you know, just how is it mainly that you're right on hand most of the time?
In those deals, we weren't committed. I wasn't committing myself. When they were both there, I didn't know, and I didn't say I knew. When they're during a bunch of the year, bears are sleeping and they're not out. That's a pretty different situation. But during the summer, whether bears are just very good at locating wolf kills, wolves are very good at locating bear kills. They're good at locating each other's kills, and I'm sure they are. They both have very good senses of smell, and you can't say. There are some cases, a grizzly bear with a calf, a red newborn calf, and the moose cow is chasing him around. He's dragging around, and he's going after the cow and running back and forth. A hunter tells me about watching a grizzly trying to get a bull moose by the hindquarters. The hunter got the moose, shot the moose, tried to shoot the bear too, but disappeared. Another guy got charged by a bear that had just killed a cow moose on the edge of a big lake down there. He and his kids were walking along, and the bear came roaring at him, and it swerved off the last minute, and he walked down there, and it just happened. Just bit in a couple places in the neck, broken her neck, apparently, laying right at the beach. No wolves around. I know people who have found bear kills in the summer, other ones, that were all eaten up. No wolf tracks anywhere around, just bear tracks. So, that's an answer to your question.
I was wondering if you could say a little bit about Fish and Game's thoughts on why wolves haven't been transplanted to other areas.
Which areas outside you?
Either, well, other areas within the state where they think could hold a few more wolves, or areas lower south.
Well, in Alaska, I don't think there's any place that transplanting wolves would be fair to the wolves, or outside either fair to the wolves. Maybe a couple places outside, but problems. Yeah, there'd be problems. It's very expensive to do. Extremely expensive. And wolves, transplanting strange wolves into places where there are established wolf packs is really hard on the new wolves. They aren't accepted very well, and they're going to get hassled a lot, probably killed, or they're going to walk into somebody's backyard and reach out. They don't know
very well at adapting to new areas from where they were born.
Well adapted to new areas.
Right.
It's a little bit like the situation outside in that here you have an endangered species, a lot of people are interested in them as abstract animals. What nobody really wants to possibly missing in the backyard.
It would just be promising. People let 4 wolves go in Upper Michigan about a year ago. I think they lived, one lived 4 months, and all of them were dead. Very, very soon. Shot. Deer hunters, they don't like wolves. They don't, there was an outfit in, I think it was Hurley, Wisconsin, that was offering a reward, an iron reward for killing these wolves that were protected. Legally, you couldn't shoot them. They were offering a reward. They didn't want them introduced in their deer hunting. Right? So chances are very good. Just if there's livestock around, problems there. Problems now in Minnesota. They tried to trap wolves and remove them. And they do it because the federal law says that that's the way they should handle it. But they feel like they're just killing the wolves. That's kind of what you're doing to remove them.
I wonder if there'd be a real ecological loss if what had happened if all the moose were exterminated. Well, if there weren't, if there weren't any more wolves, would it be disastrous to the ecology of the whole system? You know, like wolves are supposed to just pick out the dead and weakened diseased animals on the herd, you know, and drag them down. And would it,
Just that little thing, no one really knows. I think over the short term, and there are lots of examples, like the populations of hundreds that have existed already for, I think, up to 100 years without wolves. They don't seem to be deteriorating genetically. Can't detect it. You'd think so. I think eventually it's a major evolutionary pressure. If we were removed, something would change. Again, I think it would. You're talking about maybe decades or scores of years, not 3 or 5 or something. If they were made extinct, yeah, it would change things. And I can't tell you what caribou would look like in 200 years. I don't know. Yeah.
In Murray's study on kindles, he found they preyed on sheep to some extent. Is that true in these study areas? No.
Just a very little bit, because sheep aren't very common in most of it. There's a few sheep here, like maybe 200 sheep in the Watana Mountains here. Very few here, and that's about it. And up here, there's some movement really traffic. Very minor. We didn't find any sheep kills during winter. There are in other places in the Alaska Range and in the Talkeetna Mountains, there are wolves that kill quite a few sheep. I think it's uncommon for a pack to rely year-round on them to the extent they do with wolves. So they're not very big and they're a little harder to catch many times. But they're pretty important. And if they have to, they'll hunt and they can't kill sheep. Pretty effective.
Is it true that the breeding capacity of caribou has gone down in recent years for no explained reason?
No. In one little herd, Delta caribou across the river here, about 100 miles southeast of here. Apparently there was just a reproductive failure for several years. You couldn't even find calves right after the people's calving. The people weren't seeing that many wolves. There were wolves there, there's grizzlies there. Whatever, but no one could ever explain it. And this year they had a really good calf crop, 50 per 100 or something like that. Everybody, they thought it was just going to disappear. I mean, babies.
Did anybody look at adult females during that period when we weren't having any young?
Yeah, some stuff was done, and they couldn't figure it out. I think all they could say was that they were old. The population was getting to average very old because there were no new animals coming in. And maybe that had something. Maybe range was pushed. Maybe it was just at a critical point and it had time to bounce back. But no one could really explain it. And the one time a guy wanted to do it and was set up to seriously test do some physiological work with the caribou and reproductive things, which involved collecting some animals. He'd just driven into the parking lot with 6 caribou in the truck when the commissioner called up and told him he couldn't do it. Yeah, and that was that. So, because of public relations reasons or something. So nobody really knows there.
What sort of response are the natives giving to the new caribou management techniques up on
It's very kind. New caribou management techniques. Well, everything from really cooperative. Very nice. I handed out tags and attitude, but I'm familiar to those people. But they seem to understand best what's going on, and they know they have gotten concessions from people from Barrow, and not enough people from Barrow, but a person from Barrow especially, and to some extent from other villages in the Kotzebue area. They're pretty happy. Other places, Point Hope seem to be happy. People at Point Hope. They also shot some caribou illegally, which is maybe why they were happy. and Little Wainwright too. But last spring, uniformly, they didn't like it. They didn't want to hear about it. They didn't want to hear about the reduction in kills. We didn't know what we were talking about. There were more caribou than we said. Having a summer to think about it, and another chunk of data from the summer composition surveys, blam. It was right where it should be if what we said last year was true. And so I think everybody accepted it at that point. People in one region, the Nana region around Kotzebue, went to all their villages and they reapportioned what would be their part of 3,000 caribou on the basis of need rather than per capita, which is, of course,